Belated happy 4th of July, everybody, and Tony here with my review of La Gran Gala de Zarzuela with conductor José Miguel Pérez-Sierra, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The soloists were lyric coloratura soprano Cristina Toledo, light lyric soprano Mané Galoyan, lyric mezzo-soprano Carmen Artaza, light lyric tenor Santiago Sanchez, dramatic tenor Rodrigo Garul, lyric baritone David Oger, and lyric bass baritone Alejandro Baliñas Vietes, with special participation from the veteran castañet player Lucero Tena. This was definitely a special concert, not just for me, but also for everyone who has been familiar with Zarzuela, because this was a concert that was dedicated to the memory of Pilar Lorengar, one of Deutsche Oper Berlin's mainstay singers, who was also a very well-known lyric soprano, specializing in roles such as Mimi, Cho-Cho-San, Elisabetta di Valois, and a great deal of Mozartian roles, as well as being renowned for Zarzuela, not just in her native Spain, but also in Germany, in Italy, and also throughout the world. And this was also dedicated to her memory, considering that she passed away 30 years ago in 1996. Secondly, personally, this was also a special concert for me because I grew up with Zarzuela, considering that I grew up as a Filipino-American kid in Cebu, Philippines, with Zarzuela from both sides of my family. My dad's side of the family mainly also listened to it through my maternal grandparents, and my mom's side of the family were also very much exposed to it, considering that I remembered really going out to a concert, a guitar concert, where there was also some Spanish works being played, and another concert in Casino Español de Cebu, in which there was a concert, an orchestra concert that had Spanish works being played. So we basically had experience with Zarzuela. Last night's concert was an absolute blast of artistic majesty, a lot of charisma from all the singers, and even the exceptionally veteran performance done by the castañet player Lucero Tena, who, mind you, is currently 89 years old, but was still so sharp in her playing and still so brilliant in terms of how she was able to follow the music, follow the beats and rhythms, and just really had to go with such clarity and focus that I was in total awe. She was definitely the highlight of last night. Now, when we go to the singers, starting from the sopranos to the bass baritone, they were also just as fabulous. In terms of Cristina Toledo, I love her upper register. The way she was able to attack that high E after singing Me llaman la prima rosa from Jerónimo Jiménez y Bellidos El Barbero de Sevilla was absolutely astounding and bold. She also had a darling stage presence, and one that combined elegance and girlishness with such a silvery tone that I was completely blown away with her artistry, her dedication to her craft, and just how much she was able to own that coloratura soprano singing, complete with fine artistry and really good musicianship. Granted, she does need to continue working on her core, because it says a lot when a lot of the old school Spanish coloratura sopranos, such as Maria Barrientos, Mercedes Capsir, Maria Galvani, Josefino Hugoet, and Graciela Parretto had a lot more coordinated chest tones. And let's not forget about Elvira de Hidalgo, who was also renowned for being Maria Callas's voice instructor. They all had wonderful chest tones and not just those piercing high notes. So if she could really fine tune her technique to reach its ultimate potential, then she could definitely grow so exceedingly well as an artist. In terms of what Cristina Toledo had to offer last night, she was absolutely elegant, girlish, and a total angel on stage, really giving such virtuosic artistry to the nines and winning me over as a fine, light lyric coloratura soprano with such a silvery voice and a whole lot of girlishness about her that I was practically cheering her on. Mane Galoyan, who is actually Armenian, was also another superb singer in terms of her creamy, light lyric, bordering on full lyric soprano voice that combined silver, creaminess, and an elegance to it that made her vocal performances really stunning. I should know because I saw her 3 years ago as Violetta Valeri from Verdi's La Traviata, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. And this was definitely the concert that proved that she could handle both lyrical singing as well as really give off that delicacy and that great projection that she managed to produce. It's not really a voice that can be uber exciting, but what she managed to do with her voice was really something that made her clever as an artist, as well as made her worthy of my respect and admiration. And most of all, she knew how to play up the elegance so beautifully, especially in her solo arias, the Romanza de Pilar, Esta es su carta, from Manuel Fernández Caballeros Gigantes y Cabezudos, Manuel Peneja Moreno's El Gato Montes, specifically the Romanza of Soleá, Junto dende Chavalillo. Absolutely stunning work that she managed to accomplish, and that gorgeous stage presence and that equally gorgeous tone helped her so magnificently. Carmen Artaza, who was a lyric mezzo-soprano that I saw a month ago at the Teatro Real de Madrid as Stefano from Gounod's Romeo et Juliet, definitely had a nice creamy tone. She had a lot of charisma about her. I liked her performances of Sierras de Granada, which is the romanza of Maria from Jimenez y Bellido's La Tempranica. And she also did a fine job with the Canción de la Paloma, Como Nací en la Calle, from El Barberillo de Lavapiés by Francisco Asenjo Barbieri. She did have a nice creamy tone about it, but I've listened to this aria and there were also natural sopranos, coloratura sopranos mind you, like Elvira de Hidalgo, who had great coordinated chest tones and really sang it with fire and passion in comparison to a lot of today's modern singers. And this is something I would really advise Carmen Artaza to do. Really develop her chest tones, because that is just where all of that sensuality, that sinuousness, and that drama are. She really needs to keep on developing her chest tones, because from what I heard last night, she was very much head voice dominant. That's not too much of a bad thing, but relying too much on head voice may not always bring out the totality of what your voice can do. She really needs to continue to take advantage of her chest tones and coordinated chest tones to make sure that her voice truly blooms. But in terms of how I felt about Carmen Artaza's vocal performance, she was still absolutely fine. She just needs to keep on growing on her technique, and therefore her voice will continue to truly bloom to its greatest potential. Santiago Sanchez has a sensitive and darling light lyric tenor voice. It's not a voice that I would say is the most exciting. It's not a voice that I would be totally wowed with or something that would knock me off my seats. It's a very sensitive, pretty charming voice that does have a lot of potential to grow. It does say a lot when actual light lyric tenors like Luigi Alba had a lot more core and Alfredo Kraus had a lot more bite in his voice, although he is a natural light lyric tenor. And if he could continue to develop his core, develop his vocal resources, and really ensure that he develops his chest voice a lot more, and even ensure that his voice has a lot more color and charisma, then he can definitely grow as a fine light lyric tenor. That's a voice with a lot of potential for growth, and I pray that he will not squander it. Rodrigo Garrul, in terms of the tenors, he was definitely the star of last night. His charisma, his commanding stage presence, and the way he was able to bring lyricism and dramatic temperament to his voice remains absolutely laudable and something that is worthy of my praise and my admiration because of how he put himself on the map as such a consummate artist. Rodrigo Garrul definitely made such a strong impression on me for his aria, which is No Puede Ser, which is the aria of Leandro from Pablo Sorozabal's La Tabernera del Puerto, and he sang it with a lot of fire and passion. Now, interestingly enough, No Puede Ser is also a concert piece for a lot of Hispanic and Spanish singing tenors. I kind of remember Plácido Domingo being one of the exponents of this aria, so Rodrigo Garrul definitely gave it a lot of justice and a lot of passion to that particular aria. And on top of that, he continued to be such a charismatic gentleman on stage, and he was absolutely dashing from beginning to end. Speaking of dashing, that was what David Ogier was in terms of his vocal and theatrical assets. He was very charming and charismatic, and he had a very athletic way of moving around the stage, almost like a danseur reminiscent of Rudolf Nureyev and Mikhail Baryshnikov. That is just how much of a complete performer David Ogier was, especially in his number Caballero de Gracia Me Llaman from Federico Chueca's La Gran Via. And even though his voice is a bit too high for my listening ears for a baritone, he sounds more like a cross between a baryton Martin and a barytenor, and not really a dark-sounding barytenor. I could still give him credit where credit is due in terms of how he was able to master his voice pretty well. He actually has a good deal of core in his voice. He didn't sound woofy, he didn't sound throaty, and he just had a sort of elegance to his voice and his manner that made him thoroughly winsome. If he could really fine-tune his voice to reach its naturally scuro element, like what was present with voices such as Matteo Manuguera or Piero Cappuccilli or Alfred Pöll, if you want someone more Germanic, then he can definitely make it as a very fine baritone. There was no doubt that Alejandro Baliñas Vietes also stole the show last night And he was actually the best out of the overall singers. I was really excited to see, hear, and witness him in the flesh in terms of what he could contribute. And when listening to Alejandro Baliñas Vietes in terms of his vocal performance of Quel el Dios Noemi de mis Amores from El Niño Judío, he almost reminds me of a cross between George London, Samuel Ramey, and Nikolai Gyaurov. There's a certain darkness to his voice that I was intrigued with, and one that I found myself really enamored with. And he really owned his vocal resources. There was clarity, there was depth, there was a great deal of nobility in his vocal resources that made me thoroughly engaged with what he had to accomplish, and therefore made him a thoroughly brilliant shining star. I also dare not forget about the dancers who were also involved, and those were Giulia Tornaroli, Laura Garcia Aguilera, Davide Pilera, and Pascu Orti, who managed to be just as charismatic, just as charming, and just as agile as performers. So overall, the performances from the castanet playing of Lucero Tenna to all of the singers such as Cristina Toledo, Manega Olayan, Rodrigo Rarul, Santiago Sanchez, Carmen Artaza, David Ogier, and Alejandro Baliñas Vietes were all absolutely brilliant. They really owned last night's Zarzuela Gala / concert with their best abilities ever. They knew how to take advantage of their assets and do so in a way that made them shine like the brightest of stars. The conducting done by Jose Miguel Pérez-Sierra was just as amazing, just as nuanced, and just as exciting. The fact that he started the concert with a paso doble from El Gato Montes managed to make me thoroughly awake and made me thoroughly aware that this was going to be an exciting evening, which he managed to accomplish all guns blazing. He really supported all the singers, the orchestra members, and the chorus. And what more can you expect from the chorus and orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin? They were at their absolute A game, and they managed to really make the evening worth listening to and witnessing. The Gran Gala de Zarzuela at the Deutsche Oper Berlin was an absolute blast last night. From the amazing artistry of the singers, the wonderful playing of the orchestra, as well as Lucero Tenna, consistently exercising sharpness and brilliance in her castanet playing, to the brilliant conducting done by Jose Miguel Pérez-Sierra. Everybody contributed so beautifully, and I was in cloud nine. And for those of you who caught La Gran Gala de Zarzuela at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Do you feel like the singers were at their absolute best last night? Who was your personal favorite singers out of the roster? What was your personal highlight that you enjoyed so much? What really made you feel like this was such a great evening of Zarzuela? Was the conducting so wonderful? Or did you feel like it was not a package that you'd want to go back to? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my review of La Gran Gala de Zarzuela at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with your friends. And tune in next time for my review of Georg Friedrich Händel's Giulio Cesare in Egitto, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. So until then, I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July celebration, everybody.